West Texas already sits above the most productive oil region in America. Thousands of wells reach into formations that have transformed the United States into the world's largest oil producer. But deep beneath the layers driving today's boom lies a much older petroleum system. It stretches beneath enormous areas of Texas and New Mexico. In places, it is hundreds of feet thick, and scientists believe that most of its potential has barely been tested. In January 2026, the United States Geological Survey released a new assessment of what could still be trapped inside these rocks. The result suggests that the Permian Basin may possess an entirely different drilling frontier beneath the one companies are already exploiting. But this is not one enormous underground lake of crude, and the scientists did not suddenly discover a rock formation nobody knew existed. What they revealed was something more important: how much oil may remain inside layers that helped create the Permian boom, but were largely left behind by it. And to understand why, we first need to descend through the most complicated oil basin in America. The Permian Basin is not one oil field. It is a vast geological province divided into several major regions, including the Midland Basin, Delaware Basin, and Central Basin Platform. Beneath the surface, hundreds of millions of years of sediment form a stack of limestone, sandstone, shale, and other rocks. Each layer records a different ancient environment. Some formed in shallow seas, others accumulated in deep, oxygen-poor water. Later, tectonic forces folded, faulted, buried, and partially eroded them. That history created numerous petroleum systems at different depths. Today, operators drill formations including the Sprayberry, Wolfcamp, and Bone Spring. By December 2025, tight oil and shale formations within the wider Permian were producing around 6 million barrels per day, approximately 44% of total American crude oil production. But those familiar targets do not mark the bottom of the basin. Beneath many of them sit two older, darker layers, the Woodford Shale, and below or beside it, depending on location, the Barnett Shale. They are not the formations most people associate with the modern Permian boom, but without them, much of that boom may never have existed. The Woodford Shale began forming during the Devonian period, more than 350 million years ago. A widespread sea covered large parts of the continent. In its deeper waters, oxygen levels near the seafloor were extremely low. Organic material sank into this environment and accumulated inside fine mud rather than decomposing completely. Millions of years later, another rise in sea level produced similar conditions during the Mississippian period. This helped form the younger Barnett Shale, as additional sediments buried both formations. Increasing heat and pressure transformed some of their organic material into oil and natural gas. But those hydrocarbons did not necessarily remain inside the rocks that generated them. Oil and gas migrated through fractures and porous formations, moving into reservoirs above and around them. This makes the Woodford and Barnett what geologists call source rocks. They function like petroleum kitchens, generating hydrocarbons that later collected elsewhere. For decades, the most attractive business strategy was therefore obvious. Why struggle to extract oil from dense source rock when nature had already moved some of it into better reservoirs? But horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing eventually changed that calculation. A rock could now be both the source of the oil and the reservoir holding what remained. And that is where the story begins to reverse. The Woodford can reach approximately 900 feet in thickness. The Barnett can approach 700 feet. Both contain areas rich in marine organic material, and both include quartz that can make certain sections comparatively brittle. That brittleness matters. Dense shale has extremely small pore spaces, and fluids cannot move through it easily. A vertical well may contact only a limited amount of productive rock. A horizontal well changes the geometry. After drilling downward, operators turn the well sideways and continue through the formation. Hydraulic fracturing then creates pathways through which trapped oil and gas can reach the well. This combination unlocked other American shale formations and reshaped the country's energy industry. But rock quality is not uniform. Some areas contain more clay. Some are less organically rich. Some have experienced the correct level of heat to generate oil, while deeper sections have become primarily gas-prone. Natural fractures may improve production in certain places, while faults and erosion complicate it elsewhere. So the question was never simply whether the Woodford and Barnett contained hydrocarbons. Scientists already knew they did. The mystery was how much might remain across the enormous areas that companies had barely tested. In the Permian Basin, depth changes everything. Some Woodford and Barnett targets occur thousands of feet beneath already productive formations. The deepest assessed areas approach 18,000 feet, more than 3 miles below the surface. Parts of the formations extend even deeper. Every additional foot means more drilling time, more steel, more pressure, more heat, and more opportunity for something to go wrong. And after reaching the correct depth, companies must still turn the well horizontally, keep it inside a specific interval, and successfully fracture the rock. For much of the Permian's modern boom, operators had more familiar targets located above these layers. They possessed larger collections of well data, established production histories, and drilling programs already optimized for formations such as the Wolfcamp. The deeper Woodford and Barnett therefore faced a difficult standard. They did not merely need to contain oil, they needed to outperform other opportunities within the same basin. Production from the two shales began during the late 1990s, but through November 2025, activity remained concentrated along basin edges and structural highs. Together, the formations had produced only around 26 million barrels of oil. That might sound substantial until it is compared with the scale scientists believed could still remain. But before estimating that number, the USGS had to determine which parts of the basin could realistically be assessed at all. Scientists did not treat the Woodford and Barnett as two simple uniform sheets of rock. They divided them into 9 assessment units based on geology. These boundaries considered thickness, organic content, rock type, thermal maturity, structural features, and drilling depth. Areas where the formations were mature enough to generate oil were separated from deeper regions where greater heat had converted more of the hydrocarbons into gas. Scientists also used an 18,000-foot depth cutoff. That represented the approximate limit of successful American onshore horizontal drilling during the period examined. Even within those boundaries, the assessment involved enormous uncertainty. Some oil areas were more than 98% untested. Others were listed as 99.9% untested. That does not mean every untouched acre will produce oil. It means scientists had very little direct drilling evidence across much of the potentially productive area. Instead, they combined known geology with existing wells, expected drainage areas, possible success rates, and estimated production from future wells. The result was not one guaranteed number. It was a probability range, and the range became enormous. But hidden inside the calculations was another surprise. The strongest oil potential did not belong equally to every part of either formation. In the deepest portions of the Delaware Basin, much of the Woodford and Barnett has been heated beyond the main oil-generating window. Those regions are expected to contain predominantly natural gas. The largest assessed oil areas instead lie farther east, particularly within the Midland Basin and parts of the Central Basin platform. Here, the formations experienced enough heat to generate petroleum without converting most of it into dry gas. The Barnett's oil potential is especially interesting because production in its Midland Basin area has increased since 2013, despite exploration remaining limited across much of the formation. In some northern areas, carbonate layers interfinger with the shale. Scientists suggest that these harder beds may help the rock respond to hydraulic fracturing. The Woodford presents a different mixture of opportunity and risk. It can be thicker and more porous than the Barnett, with highly quartz-rich sections that appear mechanically promising. But portions of its Central Basin platform oil area may have low pressure, heavy oil, and insufficient thermal maturity. The same geological diversity that created the resource also makes its performance difficult to predict. Scientists had therefore found neither one perfect layer nor one uniform field. They had found a collection of deep, barely tested oil zones spanning millions of acres. And when the estimates from those zones were finally combined, the number was far larger than their limited production history suggested. In January 2026, the United States Geological Survey revealed its central estimate. Across the Woodford and Barnett shales of the Permian Basin, scientists calculated a mean of 1.6 billion barrels of undiscovered, technically recoverable oil. They also estimated approximately 28.3 trillion cubic feet of natural gas and 813 million barrels of natural gas liquids. Almost all the estimated oil came from continuous shale resources rather than conventional underground fields. The Woodford's Midland Basin oil area accounted for a mean of roughly 701 million barrels. The Barnett's corresponding Midland Basin area contributed approximately 660 million. Smaller quantities were assigned to oil areas around the Central Basin platform. But 1.6 billion barrels is not a precise inventory. The USGS calculated a broad range, from 470 million barrels at the conservative end to nearly 2.93 billion at the upper end. The mean sits between those possibilities, and even that central estimate comes with one phrase that changes the meaning of the entire discovery: technically recoverable. Technically recoverable means that current technology and standard industry practices could potentially produce the resource. It does not mean the oil has already been discovered by drilling. It does not mean every barrel can be produced profitably, and it does not turn the estimate into proven reserves. Reserves are known quantities that have been discovered and are considered commercially recoverable. The USGS assessment instead estimates what may exist based on geology, production evidence, and probability. To convert any part of the 1.6 billion barrels into reserves, companies would need to drill wells, confirm productive areas, and demonstrate that the oil can compete economically. That is especially important here because many targets are extremely deep. Companies would be drilling through productive formations to reach rocks with far less performance data. A technically successful well could still fail economically if it costs too much, produces too slowly, or declines too rapidly. And the formations do not exist in isolation. Every dollar invested in a deep Barnett or Woodford well is a dollar that could have targeted a better understood layer above it. So the biggest obstacle is not proving that oil exists. It is proving that this oil is more valuable than the alternatives surrounding it. Producing these layers at scale would also intensify challenges the Permian already faces. Horizontal shale wells require complex drilling and hydraulic fracturing operations. They use water and proppant to create fractures, then return a mixture of fluids and naturally occurring formation water to the surface. The Permian generates enormous volumes of produced water, much of which must be treated, reused, or injected underground. Wastewater disposal has been linked to increased induced seismicity in parts of the basin, although only a fraction of disposal wells cause earthquakes large enough to concern the public. New development would also require additional pipelines, processing capacity, and systems capable of handling oil, gas, and water from deeper, hotter, and potentially higher pressure wells. None of these problems makes production impossible. The Permian already contains one of the most developed energy infrastructures on Earth. That is one of the deep layer's greatest advantages. But infrastructure cannot make an unproductive rock profitable. Only drilling can determine which sections truly work. And with most of the assessed oil areas still untested, Texas does not yet know whether it has one major new play or scattered pockets of commercially useful rock separated by enormous areas that will never be drilled. The new assessment will not replace the Permian Basin's established formations tomorrow. 1.6 billion barrels spread across two shales is far smaller than the basin's total petroleum endowment. And even if development begins, production would arrive gradually through thousands of individual wells. Not one spectacular discovery, but the significance lies in timing. The Permian's modern boom depends on repeatedly drilling new locations. As the best-known sections of established formations become more developed, companies must improve recovery, extend laterals, or identify additional targets. The Woodford and Barnett offer another possibility. They lie beneath existing roads, pipelines, processing plants, and drilling communities. Some operators can potentially reach them from areas where an energy industry already exists. And because these rocks generated hydrocarbons found elsewhere in the basin, companies already possess decades of indirect evidence that the petroleum system works. The unanswered question is whether the source rocks can become competitive reservoirs themselves. That is how this Texas oil layer could change everything. Not by producing 1.6 billion barrels immediately, but by extending the Permian vertically, turning depth into the basin's next frontier when expansion across the surface becomes more difficult. That remains an inference, not a prediction. It depends on future drilling proving that enough of the assessed resource can be produced economically. Scientists did not discover that Texas contains oil. They revealed how much may still be hiding inside two of the rocks that helped create its oil industry. The Woodford and Barnett have spent hundreds of millions of years buried beneath the Permian Basin. They generated petroleum. They released much of it into formations above. And now, what remained behind may become valuable. Texas already built one oil revolution by learning to drill sideways. Its next one may depend on how far companies are willing to drill down. Because beneath the layers powering America today lies another petroleum system, older, deeper, and almost completely untested. The oil may be there. Whether it changes everything will be decided one well at a time.